10th, Property Finance Committee meeting to order, 5:16. We'll just go around the room real quick and introduce ourselves for everyone at home.
Shane Blazer.
Jennifer Gossick, City Clerk.
Tom Harrell, Alderman District 4.
Scott Kellogg, Alderperson.
Zach Rook, Mayor.
Vernon Majewski, Alderman.
Jonathan Reuter, E-Wave Sales.
Joe Terry, Director of Public Works. Joseph Mowry.
Tim DeSorsi, Finance.
Jay Catnow, Committee Member.
Steve Coe, Chairperson. All right, first item is consider recommendation from Statewide Services to deny claim from Nathan Pankey for damage to his tire allegedly caused by a pothole at the intersection of 2nd Avenue and West Riverview Expressway.
I'll make a motion to deny the claim. I'll second it.
We have motion second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, committee will vote. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All, anyone voting negative? All opposed? Ayes have it. Item number 3, consider recommendation from Statewide Services to deny claim from the State Farm Insurance as severity of Michaela Burkholz for causing a 2-vehicle collision at the intersection of West Grand Avenue and West Riverview Expressway that occurred when a traffic signal allegedly malfunctioned.
I'll make a motion to deny the claim. I'll second it.
The motion second. Is there any other further discussion? Hearing none, committee will vote. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Item number 4 is consider a referral from Joe Terry to review and adopt the user fee schedule for the pool facility. Joe?
So I believe an updated version of my report has been passed around. It has a little asterisk and a notation underneath it. This referral went last evening before the Parks Commission, and so the Parks Commission had some recommendations for some minor changes. So those changes are included in this report. Mr. Chairman, I can get as detailed or as brief. If you want me to go through this in depth, I'd be glad to do so. If you'd like me to just kind of touch on the high points, because we did go through it with the Parks Commission, I can do that as well. Let me know what your preference is.
If you want to do an overview, and if anyone has any questions, we
Okay.
take questions on that.
All right. So a couple of things that we looked into initially were comparable facilities and those fees. Those are included in your packet as attachment A. I also compared our median household income to those other locations to see if it's comparable, and if proposed rates are applicable, and I found that they were. So staff met and discussed different past situations, different fee schedules for the buildings. There's a few things that are a little bit different. For example, the park shelters currently do not have a non-resident differential in the rates. However, those facilities are generally built from grants and donations, whereas this facility is built in large part by taxpayer revenues. And so staff felt that the city residents who paid for this facility should have regular rates and then additional rates for non-residents. The other item that we discussed at some length were the non-swimmer guardian fees. They are not universal at facilities, but my experience in this area is that we do have a lot of non-swimmer guardians that take their kids or grandkids to the pool. They do count towards the capacity of the facility. They are using the facility, but it seems a little inappropriate to charge them a full rate. And so this schedule recommends a lower fee structure for that non-swimmer guardian patron. So to keep things simple, we're recommending a resident day pass is $4 per day, but that would be with the purchase of a resident day punch card. And so that the staff at the pool, if you're coming in with cash, you pay the non-resident rate of $6 per day. But if you've got the card that any city resident could get, then it's at that $4 rate, we've prepaid that. And the reason for that is to keep it as simple as we possibly can for the kids working the counter. So, so we can manage that resident, non-resident fee structure without them having to quiz patrons on their resident status or have to debate it with them.
Good idea.
The same, we've looked at that resident non-swimmer guardian rate of $2 and non-resident non-swimmer guardian for $4 is the recommendation. For season passes, we're recommending a resident single be $60. A resident senior or veteran, a senior is 62 or over, is half price at $30. And a resident family pass would be $120 for 4. And if there's excess of 4, it'd be an additional $10 per person. Non-resident single would be $120, non-resident family $200, plus another $10 for excess of 4. We do have the Four Seasons indoor shelter. We're recommending a resident rate of $150 a day, plus a $100 refundable key and cleaning deposit. That deposit's consistent with how we work with our other parks facilities. Non-resident would be $250 a day plus the $100 refundable key and cleaning deposit.
Joe,
Yes.
so is that an indoor space that they can rent and then use the pool?
Yes.
Or, okay.
Yes.
And is it a space that's rentable year-round that?
It is rentable year-round.
Okay.
Yes.
Question to add on to that, so if they rent the space, does that include their admission for the day, or is that going to be separate?
So that's not included in this at this time, but that's something that we can run past the Parks Commission if we want to establish a user rate if you're renting the facility.
Okay. Are all these shelters on here? I guess I'll get the question right out of the way. All be able to use the pool, or some
So,
off?
so all these other shelters, you have to already be on the deck to be able to use them. So,
Okay.
yes, it
Okay.
would include you have to be a pool patron in order to rent the rest of these shelters.
Okay.
What are the hours? You have a day here and further down you have half days. What's a half day in hours and what's a full day in hours? Does it go to 8 o'clock at night or does it go to 6 o'clock or do you?
So tentatively, the operational hours are going to be 11 a.m. to 7 p.m.
All right.
With a mid-afternoon shift change, and so the rental periods would coincide with those first and second shifts.
So half day would be 11 to 3.
Right. There's 2 cabanas, and we're recommending a $25 an hour or $20 an hour with a season pass plus a refundable $25 cleaning deposit. Those are a sail panel, a cabana type shelter, one on each corner of the facility that allows some privacy if so desired. There's also shelter areas that are first come, first serve on the deck, but these are a little more exclusive. There's a family area shelter, and that's the roof that comes off the machine shed, and that would be ideal for birthday parties and such. We're recommending $80 per half day plus a $25 refundable cleaning deposit. There's 3 bays to that. And then there's a family area shelter that's adjacent to the rental, the Four Seasons rental shelter. And that would be included with the rental if folks are using the pool. But if that rental's not being used, that area would be reservable, also at $80 per half day plus a $25 refundable cleaning deposit. That area is a little bit smaller. It's only kind of 2 bays or 2/3 of the size of the other one. But to keep it simple, we were recommending the same rate, and it's a little closer to the concession stand. It's between the concession stand and the locker room, so not that any place on the deck is inconvenient, but that's a really nice spot. So we felt that keeping the rate the same is appropriate there.
Joe, so all these areas, are they gonna be rented and have to work through Park and Rec Department? Is
Right.
that where it's gonna be? So you can't do it, you can't rent on site, or can you?
Well, we haven't gone that route
Oh,
yet.
okay.
Right now, those activities can be done online.
Oh.
And, we're looking at how can we accommodate that at the facility. I want to try to keep it as simple as I can with the kids, but if we can set up a computer workstation where you can register on site to reserve, it'll go through the same system as what our current reservations do. Then you could reserve it right on site if you wanted
I
to.
didn't know if a family showed up there and then wanted to rent a family.
Yeah, you could do it on your smartphone too.
Okay.
Or at home on a computer, see if, well, is it being reserved? I'm going to reserve it for this afternoon.
Okay.
So yes.
Sounds good.
There's also an open shelter outside of the pool area, and that we're recommending $100 a day plus a $100 refundable cleaning deposit. That one's going to be a little trickier to monitor, that $100 cleaning deposit, because it is an open air shelter. And if I've got a family event there and I'm done and leave, someone else shows up and leaves a mess, that might be a little more challenging. But I think we'll try it and see how it goes, and if we need to request some changes, we'll do so. So that's the first part, that is the rate structure. I don't know if there's any further questions about that before I move on to the next part.
Yeah, I got a couple things, just, and this is of course just an update and it's still gonna go through Parks Commission, right? I would just comment on the resident versus non-resident rates. I just wanna make sure that, being that our ref is taxpayer fund, and this is gonna be really busy the first year. I wanna make sure that they're protected and they're getting the best deal here. And with that being said, I think there's also a chance to bring in some of these other villages to help negotiate. And I would like them to reconsider the $4 versus $6 for non-resident, and maybe make that a little higher, even if it's $8, just to feel like our residents are getting bang for their buck, what they pay for the taxpayers. And then a couple other questions is just, the shelter for the Parks Commission. Does the shelter include admission? I know my family, we rented out the park shelters a lot, and of course there's no admission to those, but you never know who's gonna come, and is that gonna be paid at the door? And if not, some of them shelters could fit upwards of 30, 40, 50 people, and you might look at this and say, well, if we don't have to pay to get in, it's cheaper to rent a shelter for the day. Then
Yeah, at this point, you'd still have to do admission.
you still have to do admission, okay.
Yes.
And then food and drink at these, I know it's considered a city park, so are we gonna let people roll in coolers, or is
No.
it gonna be? No.
Because of the concession sales, the only place where you could roll food in would be that Four Seasons reservable, but that stays in the building, doesn't go out on the deck.
Okay.
Anything on premise would be concessions only.
Open shelter?
Open shelter, that's whatever you want.
Okay.
Because that's outside the fence. The resident, non-resident day use, we discussed that at some length internally. Part of the challenge is setting a fee that's appropriate for our taxpayers as compared to outside municipalities that aren't paying. But it's also desirable to operate the place at capacity, because a very substantial portion of the income is going to be coming from the concessions. And I'll be happy to entertain you know, whatever's desired for that non-resident daily pass rate. But I think we also want to be a little bit careful not to price it out of reach for folks. You know, family of 4, you're there for, you know, $25 basically. You know, if all of a sudden you're looking at $30, $40 for a day, I don't know if that becomes an issue or not. We do want to try to maximize the population at the pool. Number one, the cost per patron is, it's more efficient to operate that way, and we maximize our concession sales to offset operational costs as well.
So, with that said, if we move forward with, let's just say, these proposed rates, and we find out after this summer that we just have so many people coming from Point and Nakusa and surrounding areas that it's getting crowded and there's hypothetically not enough room for Rapid citizens, would it be at that time where this is going to be a year-to-year basis, we could change that structure to possibly make more room for Rapids?
There's no reason you couldn't change it mid-season if you felt it was
Okay.
necessary.
What have we figured out per, I guess on the mill rate per thousand, what we're paying for the pool? We have it roughly, was it?
We figured it out. We figured out per capita, like on a per head basis, and then we've also figured it out based upon. But yeah, the debt you were talking about, the debt service, like the actual.
Yeah, just kind of what the residents are paying for it. Since we're having this discussion on resident, non-resident fees, I'm just kind of, what additional are Rapids residents paying?
It's yeah, it's
Roughly the value of the house. But
well, yeah, $30 per on a $100,000 home. But I know Tim prepared. He's probably looking for the sheet right now. I'm just trying to. I don't want to misquote it because
I thought it was around 30 or 32.
it was on a $100,000
Yeah.
home was about the
30,
the
32
rate.
or something.
Right.
I'll tax it back here.
And while he's looking for that, I think the other comment I would add is just the season passes. The emphasis is to drive season pass
Yeah.
sales versus that day pass.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't, personally, I don't think there's a problem upping that non-resident rate, bearing in mind some of the things that Joe mentioned. But I think, we're, from an efficiency and just an ease, we want people to be buying those season passes. And so, yeah, maybe if that's raising that non-resident day pass rate drives more season passes, then I think we're even better served.
I do think that there's going to be a number of residents that may not want to take the time to purchase the punch pass. Look, we're just going to go down there for the day, and they'll just pay the day rate. And so I don't want to make it inconvenient for our residents either. But again, you can take a look at some of the comparisons, how other places do it, and
I think for a resident though, at that point, that's their choice. That,
Correct.
You know,
Pay the
so,
higher, yeah.
so if they choose not to come in and get the punch, or they're knowingly choosing to pay the higher rate, which then I don't have as much concern about.
Yeah, the tax impact, assuming, borrowing 10.2, that'd be basically the cost of the project less what the legacy foundation is and some other stuff. You're looking at a $100,000 house. It varies over the years depending on the debt service, obviously, between $69 and $78 per year on a $100,000 house over the life of the bonds.
So realistically, I hate to say, but it doesn't seem like if they're paying $60 for a resident pass, then they're paying $69 a year on the debt service. It almost is a wash between a resident and non-resident.
And that's kind of my concern too, is because speaking with residents around, and we've made this commitment to move forward, just that they feel they should be getting some type of a better deal. And I understand wanting to fill the pool of capacity and the concession sales, but even if it's just a little more, some type of kickback to them or benefit to them for being the ones who are footing the bill. But yeah, again, it's something that if it's an open conversation, we can change it mid-year or every year. I wouldn't necessarily have a problem moving forward with this for year one, and then year two, we're finding out, we're running at capacity a lot and we want to make room for our residents, we change it. But those were just my thoughts on the resident versus non-resident.
yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of unknowns with a facility like this, how it's going to operate, how busy it's going to be. And, you know, even after, if we did every month, presented a report, just a financial
Resident versus non-resident.
report on how we're doing, you know, patron load, pass income, and concession income and expenses, and just evaluate that. You know, that way I think we can stay on top of it. If there's a desire to make a mid-season change, we could, or ride it out for the season and have a thorough discussion and determine, you know, I mean, if we're nearly always at capacity and we get any complaints that, hey, you know, we're not able to serve our residents, we need to take a look at that fee structure to make sure that our residents get first dibs.
Excellent.
Yeah, go ahead.
I guess one thought that comes to my mind too is if we increase the non-resident rate too much, you're always gonna have someone that will find a way to circumvent the system, and one way that they could possibly do that is they'll find somebody in town that's a resident willing to buy them a punch card and give it to somebody that lives outside the municipal boundary. Therefore, now you have somebody outside the municipal boundary getting the resident rate.
Good idea.
Anybody can, I mean, that's happened to the city on other things too, where people have taken advantage of city services on other things, and what do you do to combat it? I mean, you know.
I think the monthly report would be great. People are gonna be curious, I'm curious, and then we can evaluate, you know, as it goes. But I know that's one thing that's been brought up a lot is just the surrounding municipalities and having the opportunity to pitch in, and they didn't, and now it's like, okay, well, they had that chance, and so.
We haven't, that's the next part of this.
Okay, all right.
Is, you know, we've talked about that, if it's okay for me to move on.
I was just
Yeah.
going to say, I was glad that Craig brought up the senior and veteran price last
Yes.
night. I think that was a good idea.
Yeah.
If I could just maybe make a quick comment on the, to the point that was raised about the debt service, and I think it's not so much that the prices are just twice as much for non-resident, it was trying to figure out equity, like what is a family gonna contribute by nature out of kind of only the property tax levy or whatever, and then looking for that number, and I wouldn't say that the number exactly worked out to be $60 less, but it was to the point of recognizing that everyone is already making a contribution, and I think when people say, why is non-resident twice as much? Well, there is that inherent contribution everyone is making, so I think that, you know, not that the math exactly works out that way, but it's, you know, considering most of the numbers are looking at other municipalities and just kind of what's the common way of pricing something, and then the pro forma too. You know, the $120,000 subsidy every year is based upon a bather load with these general numbers baked into it. So, you know, it's just kind of the whole bigger picture too, just to be cognizant of that.
So the next part of this is to address this inclusive resident status and make an offer to the surrounding municipalities. We've discussed this at a staff level. The mayor has met, I've met with two of our neighboring municipalities just to, or their officials, just to kind of bounce it off them and see if there might be interest. And there's at least there was interest in discussing it further. And you know, before we attempted to negotiate anything, we wanted to make darn sure that the council was in favor of that activity, right? So that's this inclusive resident status recommendation. The facility is sized to be a regional facility, and so we are recommending an option for surrounding municipalities to enjoy resident rates for the life of the facility if they choose to collaborate with the city on construction and annual operation costs. The rates proposed are based on actual construction costs and an annual budget subsidy of $120,000 for operation. The construction participation we're proposing is a one-time $270 times the population. And I give an example in there. City of Nacusa, for example, population of 2017 would be a $687,000 contribution. Annual operating costs would be $2.99 per capita. And compared to operating one's own pool facility, that's a bargain. And if it just, if everybody chips in, it's very advantageous to the city as well. And so we're recommending that we offer this invitation to the following municipalities: the Ho-Chunk Nation, City of Nakusa, Village of Port Edwards, Village of Buren, Town of Grand Rapids, Town of Port Edwards, Town of Saratoga, Town of Seneca, and Town of Siegel.
Before anyone makes a motion, I'll just want to pause and see if anyone has any further questions for Joe on any part of this.
I just want to say I agree. I think that's allowing that resident status would be a good thing.
Yes, 100%. I'd like to see these other municipalities chip in, because in reality, I mean, this has been a talk for a while. Their citizens plan on coming, so this could be a benefit, as you mentioned, of both municipalities. Right.
Anything, Tom? I would make a motion to accept the pool fee schedule and subsequent recommendations for inclusive community involvement as presented by the Public Works Director.
I'll second it, just with the comment that, we were, with the monthly report, we're reviewing that this could be changed or revisited at any time.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, committee will vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Item number 4 is consider a referral from Alderperson Rayom for a study with Public Works for different ways to assess residents for future installations of streets, sewers, sidewalks, curb, and gutter. Tom, since it's your referral, start with you.
All righty, yeah. Well, over the years, this has always been a contentious issue, assessments for public works projects that have come up. And so I don't know that it's ever been done officially that a referral was ever turned in, but it was discussed several times over many years. And I just thought that the time was right to turn in a referral to see if there was to have not this committee to do really anything tonight other than that you read for staff to look at what other communities do, what other options that there may be, if there are any, and then that something, a report of their findings to be brought back and a decision to be made, I guess. I don't know if it falls upon the finance committee or if that falls upon the public works that does the assessment go through, but we're here tonight discussing it. So that's I think for me basically where it comes from, that it's been an issue every year when people get the assessments of what it is through the different projects, and so it's just investigate and see what different ways, possible ways there may be from something maybe totally different, or if it can be to reduce what the percentage rate is or something to do that. But it's whichever way it goes affects the entire community. Those directly involved getting assessments each year, but those that have had assessments in the past, but also those that never have had an assessment yet done. So the entire community is affected by it. But basically, I think tonight it's to look at either to give direction to the staff or to ask the staff to come look into to see what other communities are doing, what options are out there, what possibly could be looked at to do something different.
Yes, sir.
I guess, is this a referral to possibly look at like hiring a third-party service to do this study, or just direction internally? Is there anything that, I mean, do we do that regularly, or are we just kind of been operating as?
So there was a review of the assessment procedure here a few years ago, but the ordinances directly relating to how the city assesses are pretty long-standing. And every year, the assessment hearings, you know, a good portion of the people who received assessments show up. They haven't experienced it before, and so they're not happy. You know, you get a $5,000 or $10,000 invoice for a project that you need to pay over the next 10 or 15 years, you're not happy about it. And you know, there's been some question recently about, you know, are we doing the right thing? You know, how else can we pay for these? You know, is it too much of a financial burden on a property owner to have these projects directly assessed like this? And I really think that it is important that the city embrace its ordinances. And I think a review like this will be healthy. There'll be public input. We can. I mean, as staff, we're certainly, our engineering department is certainly capable of doing that type of survey. We can contact a number of municipalities surrounding us. We can contact a number of municipalities that are similar in size, and bring back a report of what other municipalities are doing, and then describe some options. There are some things that have changed, you know, over the last number of years. This introduction of a wheel tax, for example. Our stormwater utility, you know, might be an option for dealing with curb and gutter assessments if that's a direction that's of interest. But those are relatively new tools that the city hasn't had at least in the distant past. And you know, and at the end of the day, I think when we have assessment hearings, there really needs to be some continuity and understanding between the staff, the alderpersons, and the public of how the system works, and that we embrace it, however painful it may be, but the messaging needs to be consistent. So I think it's a great idea.
Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I really have a concern. Like at the last Public Works Committee, a group of people showed up because of sidewalks, and I understand their concern. I mean, but the thing is, I think we have to have a policy is when do we put sidewalks in, when don't we? And have it consistent, rather than who shows up. Because you could have a room full of people, and because a room full of people, we're not going to put sidewalks in. But what is it based on? Is it based on traffic? Is it based on safety? What's it based on? And then decide as a common council, what are the criteria we're going to have to put sidewalks in or not put sidewalks in, so it's not cherry picking, where it's over here we're putting sidewalks in, over here because no one showed up. I mean, we're putting sidewalks in because people showed up, over here we're not. I just think it's not fair for the residents of the area, because they didn't show up, we're gonna put sidewalks in. And then a part of this is replacing sidewalks. In my neighborhood, I'm guessing I have like 6 slabs in front of my house. It's gonna cost me, I don't know, $1,200 or $1,600. And that's gonna be put in. There's a person diagonally across from the library on Garfield. I'm guessing they're gonna put in 100 feet of sidewalk. That's a corner house. That one side is totally poor and it's all marked up, and then around the front. And now that person's gonna have to put in sidewalks. Now is that person like me is going to have to pay for it, and that's a large amount of concrete right there. So it's really kind of a convoluted issue that I think has to be clearly identified. So when we say we're gonna put sidewalks in, it's clear, the rationale's clear, maybe there's ways of subsidizing it, with some wheel tax or whatever, maybe the city should pay for it. I don't know those things, and the common council has to decide. But what upsets me is that a group shows up, and because a group shows up, we're saying no. That just doesn't, why are we saying no? And what's the rationale? And the assessments were high. I have to agree, from anybody, from senior citizens to a young family, anybody. 10,000 is 10,000. You could buy a car for, down payment for a car for that. So I agree with the concerns that those people had. But what I'm concerned about is consistency and fairness, depending upon where sidewalks should be and where they shouldn't. So however that's thrown into that discussion, I like to consider that fairness as part of that. And also replacement of sidewalks of that. I don't know who lives in that home, to be honest, but I know it's going to be very expensive. And so we're not putting sidewalks in one area, but this person has to replace, I'm guessing it's going to be probably 20,000 if you look at the amount of sidewalk. So this person has to put in 20,000, while over here, this person was assessed for 10,000, and we said that was too much, so we're not going to do it. It's just a challenge. I think we have to resolve it, make it clear and consistent. So.
I agree with Tom, and I agree with you, Scott. And do we have an ordinance already that dictates, and I think we need to review that ordinance along with this. And I also believe that maybe when a new council is seated, that's something that's brought before them, so they're aware of it and they need to reaffirm what that assessment policy is. But I do agree.
Go ahead, sir.
And I think implementation will also be a consideration. Thinking about the other cities that have implemented, one option that I mentioned to Tom that Joe didn't mention is the city of Kaukauna has implemented a utility fee basically on their utility bills to help pay for infrastructure and transportation. At the end of the day, nobody's getting out of paying for it, right? So we just got to remind residents it's their public dollars, their money, and the fact that we're revisiting the equity equation of who pays for it, and then ultimately how are we going to implement it? If there is an alternative, how those last couple of years, 3 years or 5 years of people that have been assessed, how do they get treated? Or those that are still paying on a 10-year payment plan? I think it's the tough thing will be to wean off the old system and move to a new, and not that we shouldn't, that's not a reason not to do it. I think there's a lot of good alternatives. It's just a matter of how do residents feel about another fee. The perspective of the city levying for, we can only levy for a certain amount of it, but we're borrowing for most of our public construction. There's an equity component there, but certainly good review is healthy and gives everyone a good sense of what are others doing, on how much, on what basis. But I think implementation will be very interesting to hear what residents feel about certain fees versus the assessment versus a tax, if it's framed as a tax, or a vehicle registration fee, as Madison calls it, is a wheel tax that everyone else calls it. So, how it's framed in messages is going to be interesting. But I think it's healthy to review it, so I would agree. And it would be internally. It would, there wouldn't be any external resources necessary in this exercise.
I know a couple of years ago, I received a phone call from a senior citizen in my district who had a fairly large assessment. I think it was over $15,000. Individuals on fixed income, like a lot of people that show up to the special assessment hearings, because he had to get the easement put in, he had the sidewalk, and then the fees for the road and curb and gutter. And I was fairly new on council at that time, and I took a look at it, and personally, in my own opinion, I would be more in favor of getting rid of the special assessments and doing some sort of utility surcharge or something of that nature, because just like our example of the pool, when you have other communities put a little bit in, it makes it cheaper and more palatable for everybody else, as opposed to giving somebody a bill that could be as low as $5,000 or north of $20,000. But at that time, we weren't able to do it, and there were certain people that also, like you pointed out, had the issue with, well, I just got an assessment, I'm still paying on it. So you're gonna, if you change it, you're gonna have that. And I know ultimately, when we put that through a couple of years ago, what we did do was the city only used to give you 10 years to pay back a special assessment. But we did get it moved up to 15, where, you know, now you have up to 15 years. I mean, granted, it doesn't make it any easier to swallow a $10,000 assessment sometimes, but it's somewhat of a relief for a homeowner. I guess maybe, and I agree with Tom, absolutely, to look at this, and everything I said here, I agree with, to look at it, but maybe also in that discussion, if there is something that, where a homeowner needs more relief, if we were to offer, in special circumstances, offer a homeowner a different way to handle an assessment if the homeowner can prove a hardship. Like if they're rubbing pennies together to get by and they're not gonna be able to cut it in 15 years, if their tax bill is gonna go from $2,500 a year to $5,000 a year, and they're just not gonna be able to absorb that additional $2,500, maybe do we look at going beyond the 15 years of special circumstances? I think it'd be worth considering.
Yeah, I like the, and I mean, we'll consider all these ideas, I'm sure, at a later date, but the idea of adding it to utility costs or adding an extra fee, going that route, because this, to me, like if someone invests in Wisconsin Rapids and buys property, or they're the ones who are mostly getting hit by this, is the property owners. Or someone just moves into town, you know, rents for a couple of years, they're not, I mean, unless their landlord raises the rates or it rolls down that way, they're not paying towards this if they move out to Grand Rapids all of a sudden, or they decide, you know. So if you invest in the community, or if you're here for just the 3 years, you're paying on the utility bill towards that sidewalk wherever you live at that time, versus maybe coming and staying for a bit, then you get out and you never even have to see that fee, versus us who are purchasing homes here, purchasing property to rent here, or things of that sort. So I kind of like that idea, but I guess we'll see where this goes. But yeah, I agree then, it is something that needs to be done.
And the equity part will be complicated. I mean, if I'm a new developer and I'm gonna develop a significant subdivision, I'm paying for those pieces of infrastructure. And now my tenants are paying again right away if it were a fee-based, right? I mean, I think we can look at all the possibilities and try to weigh the pros and cons and try to see if there isn't a more equitable method, but it will be a challenge. And we'll put together, I'll have staff put together a scope of what we intend to try to capture. And we'll run that past the committee again to see if what we intend to capture seems sufficient. And then we'll go about gathering the data. So we'll put together kind of our own, our own draft scope and bring it back.
Go ahead.
I'll be curious to see what those results are, or see if there's a common theme, or what we're doing is the most common way. I'll just be curious to see.
Yeah, be interesting.
Joe, when you get that put together, then that scope that you talked about, would you also
Bring it to it as a referral.
Would you also take that to Public Works then as well? Or is that?
Yeah, we'll send it out to all the alderpersons, and, it is probably most suitable as a property and finance committee item because it is a finance issue. But I think it's gonna be of interest to everybody.
All right.
And I think also reviewing the ordinance for sidewalks installation, or we can reaffirm it or make
Right.
everybody aware of it. I'm a big believer in sidewalks, so.
All right. Next is consider a referral from Alderperson Rayon to enter into a one-year contract with a reputable fundraising company to establish a scope of services to include refinement of fundraising strategy for the Aquatic Center capital campaign. Tom?
Here we go again.
Here you go again. Floor is yours.
No, and it somewhat dovetails, I guess, off of the report that we just had a couple items ago, that Joe gave on the Aquatic Center, and to get other communities or whoever to become involved, into this, a community or corporation or, company, something. And my thought was, is there an added component that we could have to to possibly look at this fundraising. And that's why then I put in about, what I put in was just, I think in my referral, I actually had a dollar amount that I had put in there, but that was just a dollar amount thrown out there. Is there an added way to help staff to go about contacting all the different organizations that we want and to, you know, help with the outcome, you know, maybe have a better outcome with some added help in a different way. So that's basically why I was, that I put that referral in there, was give some thought to is there an added component that we could be using? I don't know if the mayor might have anything to add to throw in on something here, so.
I think what Tom's referring to, and as the agenda states, really coming up with a scope of services. You know, we don't need somebody to go around and ask people for gifts. Well, you know, staff and, you know, and anybody with a heartbeat and passion for the project can ask for money, right? But what is probably lacking, or what a need is, you know, as we talk with corporate donors, they're specifically interested in what's the value they're going to get in exchange for their gift. It's, you know, for some, a name on a shelter is great, but that's not why they're necessarily giving. They want a little more value in exchange for that, and that would be, you know, a corporate package. You think about, you know, the Rafters example, right? There's a lot of value in exchange for those gifts. It's not a donation to the Rafters. It's a sponsorship. And I think that's what if I were, one element of what Tom's talking about is related to that corporate sponsorship or whatever you want to call it, but sponsorship seems to be the best, I think, word that comes to describe what businesses are looking for in exchange of that. So what Parks and Rec staff would come up with for a value exchange would be, you know, it's just been hard for them to quantify that. And, you know, I think, you know, a business X that's looking to take their employees on an outing is of value to them. So it's just, I think, more or less helping to craft those, if I were to interpret where the gap or the need is, and that's specific to that, less about, you know, being in front of a donor asking for a gift, because that's been done. It's just taking the feedback and the information that they want, or the expectations, I guess, that those donors have in exchange for whatever a gift might be. So that would be one component that I think, if you're asking me my input, that would be a need. You know, certainly there's the extent of fundraising that we could pay for services. I just don't know if that's, you know, necessarily a need, but to define the strategy and the framework for what sponsorships would occur would be a need. And I think the process would be to solicit proposals with a defined scope for that. You know, it's as much marketing strategy as it is, you know, fundraising, but it's just a form of it, I guess. So that would be my comments if the council, you know, it's this referral, but that would be, I guess, a need if there is something that we would like to address.
Bud?
Yeah, I'd like to ask the mayor what he thinks about having the legislative committee take on this job, because the legislative committee is usually comprised of a member of each one of the other committees, along with the mayor, and get the staff involved. And so you get input from the finance committee, personnel committee, the public works committee, the mayor, and the city staff all working together on this. It's not going to be an easy task, I don't think. But I think we can come up with something.
If you're asking me, I think that would certainly be a venue where you could facilitate that discussion.
I think that would
Sure.
be a good job for the legislative committee.
Committee to work on, yeah. I mean, I think execution of the strategy is probably the need, and that would be of somebody perhaps outside of the city per se. You know, that's not a city staff member, not an older person, not, you know, the mayor. That would be just if I were to offer that. But I think the legislative committee certainly could facilitate the discussion and the components and bless the packages, if you will, for what's being offered, sort of in the way that we just went through the municipal contributions, right? There's a
And in the end, there's gonna have to be an ordinance change anyway if we're gonna change the system or adopt something new.
So I'm just curious, so with Encourage and the YMCA, they've had a lot of success with this in the past, and this community is raising money to build a new Y, or whether it's a Tribune project. Is this something, we're talking about, in here it says 1-year contract, are these organizations that we would bring in to pitch their services and tell us what the scope and what they do for us is? Or how do we go about looking for an organization or a person to move forward with this? Because I honestly, I'm not sure what the Y or what the Encourage did, but whatever they did, they had great success with it. And is that a third party that they hired, or was that just internal committees?
Well, it's certainly a hybrid. I think we did approach one firm when we first kicked off the design process that actually MSA brought to the table that they've used in conjunction with other projects. We didn't, whatever their services that they proposed didn't seem to fit what our project was. It seemed like they were more grants writing for, state grants for like our DNR stewardship, the riverfront funding source, right? More like that versus our community businesses, foundations, and that type of thing. But as it relates to the YMCA, certainly they had an organization that managed the fundraising efforts for that project. Now they still had their staff manage the donations and the pledges, and then they had their capital committee that was organized to go off and do the pitches, which I'm kind of interpreting as a hybrid of all of us, making whoever has a connection to make those presentations. But yeah, there was a paid group that did the fundraising management for that project. Sure.
So as a move of action, would that be a motion to then ask to have a request for proposal out to the companies that may do services such as this to come back and consider their pitch and what they can do for us? Or what's the next step of action in possibly retaining one of these third-party organizations like the Y did to assist with this?
If you're asking me, I think interpreting what the referral, even what Tom said, it would be to come up with that scope. What do we want this firm to do, right? And putting that to paper, because a firm isn't going to give us a proposal unless we have a scope defined, right? And I think the scope has to be reflective of everybody's, if that's the direction that's decided, whatever that scope is agreed to. And then to solicit proposals from the few firms that might be interested in doing that work. I don't think it's elaborate, where they involve a big firm. It's really somebody that's versed in developing marketing and promotional packages as much as anything, at least for the portion of the scope that I'm referring to. Maybe others have more scope that's some need.
So which part of the city defines that scope or brings that back to us to see what the scope is? I assume it would be, Adam's former position, or where does that fall? I mean, if we wanted to take a next step on this, because I think this is a great idea, that we move forward with some type of idea to get this fundraising going, especially because it's prime time right now. We're going to be opening this. People are excited about it. It's the buzz versus, a year from now and it's already open and all completed. How do we move forward with just advise what city department to look at the scope, or what's the next action item here? I guess is what I'm asking.
I mean, you could take an action to direct staff to come up with a scope and then come back and bring it back to the committee for review. Or if the committee feels good about a scope tonight, if there's a recommendation to the council on the scope.
Tom, what would you like to see? Do you want staff develop the scope, or would you think for committee, like a committee or a committee of the whole or a legislative committee develop the scope?
It'd be fine with me, with staff to do it, but I just think we have to, it's to get the ball moving. However, I think there's good points to everything that was said of how to go about to do it, so it's just, I think, which way to pick to go. It's at the point, I think, that to do something extra. It's, you know, my thing was to add something to the process, to help out what staff has been doing, and now we're at the point of, with more fixed numbers that are there shown, and that, you know, to add help to get through this process over the next, you know, several months.
Yeah, that's okay. I guess my concern is that, are we at the final hour here trying to do something? Because later in the agenda, we're already talking about the bonding, and we're gonna be discussing the balance of the bond. So we're gonna be committed to the bond and the interest payment no matter what. Because we don't have any money to reduce that, so I'm just wondering, I'd be curious to see what the scope would be and what that would include, because no matter what, we're kind of at the final hour here. Maybe this should have been done a couple of years ago, and, because, yeah, we're still gonna be on the hook for the balance to borrow. And I don't know how we wouldn't be able to alleviate that borrowing amount at this point, probably.
I
I
think
don't
Tim
know.
has the way the proposed structure on later on the agenda,
Yeah.
as
Oh,
you mentioned.
okay.
We get
Tim should
there.
lend it, maybe, it's a good point to make that point now.
Point that made now is that, you know, we have a $500,000 matching grant.
Yep.
And so basically, if we raise 500,000, we'll get matched 500,000. So that $1 million, when I'm, because obviously, you know, the project's, you know, is going and it's gonna be completed before the fundraising will be completed.
Yep.
So the proposed structuring of the bond issue is that we're gonna borrow for the portion that we have, about $3.2 million. And then that $1 million, we're gonna issue a bond anticipation note. Basically, it's a short-term financing where you're only paying interest only.
Okay.
And you set that to come due at the end of your fundraising. And so whatever funds that you have raised, that'll go to pay that off. If you don't raise the funds, then you just refinance it in a permanent financing, but it gives you the option to have a short-term borrowing, get the cash now needed for the project, but then as those contributions come in, when that note comes due in a year and a half, then you use those contributions to pay off that note.
And how much is that? You said $1 million?
Yeah, it's about $995,000. So it would be in a bond anticipation note. So assuming a successful campaign, you're able to raise that $500,000, then you'd have the money and then that would be paid off at the end of the campaign.
So on the other side of it, what if the campaign is not successful?
But then basically what you do is when it comes due, you just refinance that into long-term financing. So then we would probably time it off with, because normally every year we're going to the debt market for capital projects for street construction, so then we would just time it with that and then just add that onto that and you just permanently finance that as if into the.
And that would be $1 million of how much? So a total of $3.5 million borrowing for,
Oh,
or,
how about I just distribute this now? We can just go over it now, give us some time later.
I do care.
You do care.
Of course I care.
So basically on the front page where it says the, you know, levy cost, you can see what we budgeted, and basically this is the proposed structure where we would issue a 20-year bond for $3.2 million approximately for the aquatics facility. And then you see the other borrowings for our street and storm sewer construction. And then the TID number 8, the telco development, the rail spur, our portion of that. And then below that, you'll see the bond anticipation notes. So basically, we'd be issuing short-term financing of that, so we'd have the proceeds now to pay, obviously, for the construction of the pool. And then depending on the timing of that grant, it's probably be a year and a half. We would structure the bond anticipation notes, say we come due, whatever contributions you had, then that's what we'd use to pay off when the note comes due. If you come up short, then you would just roll it into a refinancing of that. So it gives us the flexibility to
better than
kind
nothing, I
of extend
guess.
and the only added cost would be obviously the interest on the anticipation notes, but at this point.
1 year is a lot better than 20.
Right, and hopefully we raise that $1 million and it's paid off and doesn't require. And then on the back side, you'll see, I did a revised budget, kind of went through, you know, based on, the top portion is basically the construction budget with all the various categories. Then in below, I show how all that's being financed with the 3 bond issues. And then obviously, the nice thing is the investment earnings that we have, when we get the bond proceeds, we invest them until we pay the bills. So the interest they earn on that, we can use towards the project. So we got about 89,000 there. And then you'll see the grants and donations assumes that, you know, the Legacy Foundation is $3 million. That includes the $2.5 million plus the 500,000 matching. And then you'll see community, that's the Legacy matching grant requirement. And then the other community donations and water light. So it kind of shows you the sources and uses of funds for the project. And then the 17, 18, 19 are actual expenditures to date. So, well, that kind of
So I think with that said, in relevance to this agenda item, I'd be willing to make a motion here. Motion that we direct city staff to develop a scope for a potential fundraising third-party company for the Aquatic Center capital campaign.
I'll second that. A motion and second. Is there any other further discussion? Hearing or seeing none, committee will vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Item number 7 is to consider a request from Joseph L. Maury for Jack in the Box Resale Pawn and LLC, doing business as Jack in the Box Resale and Pawn, located at 1551 West Grand Avenue, for a pawnbroker, second-hand article dealer, and second-hand jewelry dealer license. This item was brought back from last month, and Joe is here in attendance tonight, so I'll start with you, sir.
I been in the construction business and want to get out of the construction business, and thought this was a good opportunity to do something else. And it's cold outside, I'd be inside. And I bought the building on the aspect that I'd be allowed to have a resale pawn shop. And I went and got my LLC, I got my EIN number, got my seller's permit, I got the okay for the sign put on the building, I got my bond, I got my insurance. I don't have a banker's license, can't get a banker's license until I get approved from Yins to have a business license.
Go ahead, Joe.
In your letter here, it says that you will not buy or sell any weapons, firearms, guns, ammo, tobacco, or alcohol.
It's close to the school property.
Right.
There'll be no guns, no tobacco, no, because of the school property, and there'll be none of that there.
Okay, yeah, my only concern when this came before is just, we didn't see much of the plan itself, and
Right.
we weren't sure what
Sure.
we were doing. Even if you were to go that route, I think more, I know the concern I had, or we had is, in general, was just what the security measures would be, and
I
just a
got
little detail on it.
Solaris, Dale from Solaris is gonna do my internet. He's gonna do my cameras. The back doors will have the deadbolt, plus will have slide locks. The front glass will have, I'm not sure what kind yet, but some kind of metal framework over the glass when we're closed. I'm not sure what style or what kind or what brand, or if it's made from somebody. I'm not sure of that aspect of that yet. But there'll be cameras, 90-degree cameras, 2 on the outside, 2 at the back door, and then whatever Dale recommends for the inside. I don't know that number.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that was all the only question.
That's my concern.
Anyone else have anything? Any other questions for Joe?
Everything will be kept inside the building, right?
You're not planning on having anything outside?
Well, we did discuss that a little bit for advertising. I mean, sometimes there are rollable carts that you can put outside to catch somebody's eye, and I talked to the sign people up front, and a sign, I don't have the literature with me, but there is what they call sidewalk signs you're allowed to put outside to catch somebody's eye. So those we had talked about, yes, sir. But they would not be left out at night. They would only be out during the open hours.
Any other questions or discussion?
Nothing would be stored outside.
Nothing stored outside? All right. Well, I'll make a motion to approve the pawnbroker, secondhand article dealer, and secondhand jewelry dealer license for Joseph L. Maury as presented.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, committee will vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. And then the process is it just approved the committee level tonight, so next week it'll go to the full common council for final approval there at that time.
That the 18th,
17th.
17th,
Yep, next week on the
6
17th.
o'clock.
6 o'clock?
Yep.
And I'll come for that, and I'll have all my stuff that I have now. Anybody, I can give it to them or whatever. I got my bond today, I got that paid for today, so.
I'd say if there's any information you'd want the council to consider, if you want to drop that off with the city clerk.
I'll make copies of that tomorrow and get dropped off.
Yeah, she can distribute it to all the alder persons then.
All right.
All right.
I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Item number 8 is consider a request from Hunter Borkman doing business as Eco ATM located at 4331 A Street South for renewal of a secondhand article dealer license.
Eco ATM, what is that?
Inside
It's in
Walmart,
Walmart.
they buy those cell phones.
Oh,
Kiosks you go to. and
Those
press the
kiosks,
button, yeah.
oh,
Right when
okay.
you first walk in.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Sean.
For renewal.
I'll make a motion that we approve.
I'll second. A motion second. Is there any other further discussion? Hearing none, committee will vote. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, ayes have it. Consider a request from Jonathan Reuter doing business as E-Way Sales LLC located at 2660 8th Street South for a renewal of a pawnbroker, secondhand article dealer, secondhand jewelry dealer license.
Well, I could say a lot, but.
Right.
Jonathan's been in business for a very long time, and matter of fact, has expanded and bought a building, and I'd like to make a motion to approve that license.
Yeah, I'll second that.
We have motion second. Is there any other further discussion? Hearing none, committee will vote. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Congratulations.
Perfect.
Another year. Thanks for enduring the meetings.
Yes.
Consider a request from James A. Bell doing business as GameStop, number 3524, located at 930 Coon Avenue, for renewal of a secondhand article dealer's license. That business has been there for a couple of years. I have no problem renewing this. I'll make a motion to renew.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and second. Any other further discussion?
Just one thing, the store number is 3254.
Did I misread it?
Yeah. Just for the
325.
record, it's
Okay.
3254.
I will hold the motion with the correction. You still for your
Yep.
second? Motion second. Any further discussion? Committee will vote. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, ayes have it. Consider a request from Dolgen Group LLC doing business as Dollar General Store, 21068 Nicole Greffenhagen, agent, for a Class A liquor license for the premises located at 820 8th Street South. We got rid of the quota on the Class A's. Representative Dollar General's been here every meeting. I'd make a motion to approve their Class A liquor license.
I'll second it.
Any questions for Dollar General?
Glad we can level the playing field.
All right. We had the motion in second, right?
Yep. You moved, I seconded.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Committee will vote. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, ayes have it. And kind of like I told the, goes to council now on the 17th for final approval.
Perfect.
So, but should pass.
Okay.
You're good.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
Yep, thank you.
Consider a request from GPM Southeast LLC doing business as Bread and Butter Shop, number 4533, Amber Saburki, agent, for a Class A liquor and Class A beer license for the premises located at 1740 17th Avenue South. I'll make a motion to approve?
Go ahead. Did you want any background on
I
this one?
think they sold them, right?
They did.
Right.
So, GPM Southeast is the new company that bought that business. So they are applying for they have to apply for the new licenses because the former licenses went with the old owner. Am I making sense?
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
So, and they're applying for both the Class A liquor and the Class A beer at both locations. Right now, they only have Class A beer at the 8th Street location, so they're applying for both.
Okay.
And the sale is finalized, so.
I know that, I think they said they were bought once and then bought again, so.
Yes, it was turned around in just like a couple of weeks.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
so. And if you want, I mean, they're both at their locations, it's item 12 and 13. However you want to deal with those.
One at a time.
We'll take it one at a time.
Okay.
Yes. All right, so I put the motion for item number 12. Did you second?
I can second.
You will? That's what it
I
says.
will.
All right.
I second it.
We have a motion and second. Is there any other further discussion? Hearing none, committee will vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Item number 13, consider a request from GPM Southeast LLC doing business as Bread and Butter Shop, number 2130 Amherst Berkey, agent for a Class A liquor and Class A beer license for the premises located at 2130 8th Street South. I will make a motion to approve that.
I'll second it.
A motion second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, committee will vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Item number 14 is beverage operator licenses. Those were reviewed. None are recommended denied by the police chief. I will make a motion to approve the beverage operator licenses.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, committee will vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Item number 15 is to review the 2020 general obligation bond issue with amount and timeline. We have more left on that, or?
No, I was just, obviously you see the structure that's being proposed. And basically going from here is that January 21st, we're kind of going through this process a little bit earlier than we normally do just because of the timing of the project and the estimated draw schedule that was given to us when we started this and structured it. They're about $1.7 million ahead on that draw, so that's obviously why we need the funds sooner than later. So that's why we're moving up the financing and starting it now as opposed to usually March. So basically, the January 21st council meeting, we bring a preliminary resolution to issue the GO bonds. And at the February 18th council meeting was when we would award the sale of those bonds, and then we would close on the bonds and receive the proceeds sometime in March. And so basically, we'd be issuing, at least at this point, GO bonds about $4.9 million, and then bond anticipation notes for the $995,000. And then basically, just kind of wanted to review this with you to make sure that you guys are okay with the structure and proceeding with the issuance.
I guess my question is, why did we settle on 995 as the bond anticipation note? And not, say, 2 million, or is there?
Well, I mean, basically that amount was the $500,000 matching grant.
Okay.
So that's why we came up with that portion.
I didn't know, because if we raised $2 million,
Right.
now we're committed to interest on another $1 million for 20 years.
Right.
I just didn't know if there was, it would
No,
be
that was
logical
the
to-
structure based on the matching grant that we have there.
Okay, I didn't know if it makes sense.
You know,
but-
obviously, if we do get raise more than the $1 million, you can still hold that money
Yeah.
and invest it. And
Mhm.
then as the bond payments come due, instead of levying taxes for that debt service, you can use that money to make those bond and principal payments.
Okay.
So,
Is there any chance we might run into, when we go through this donor process, though, that some of these donors want to see these funds applied immediately versus held and stretched out over time? Is that?
well, I mean, the problem is that we're we're so far into the construction of the project. I mean, obviously, if they were saying if we hadn't started construction, you have a little bit more leeway to know how much you've raised before you, but since we're basically halfway through
Right,
construction,
right. Yeah.
it's, we signed the contract, we gotta make the payments, so at this point, it's like, we gotta go borrow the money now. If we get donations in excess of that, that's a conversation we can have. Like I said, you can always put them in a reserve fund to use to pay down the debt as it comes due also.
Or possibly, this could be a conversation we have with each donor of how they want the funds to play. Like if company X wants to sponsor a cabana for the 50 grand, and they want that money applied immediately, that is, we'd be able to do that on a per basis and not necessarily have to carry all of it over.
Well, I mean, the problem is once we go to the market, bond the money, we're gonna have the money
Right.
to pay for those expenditures.
I
So,
gotcha, yeah.
like I said, it's just a little tough because we're already well into construction, so.
Right.
And the bad part about us borrowing is there's no payoff early benefit like you do on a
Right.
mortgage. You're stuck for the 20 years, the interest is what it is, and
There are call provisions that are placed in there, that's.
Sporadic.
So, I mean, usually those, after a number of years, but you can call some of the bonds before the 20 years is up.
okay.
But I mean, it'll be like, I can't remember exactly what it is, but that's something that we can discuss. But there are call provisions in there where you might be able to call some of the bonds
Okay.
and pay them off early. But usually those call provisions are well into the
Right.
issuance, just because investors wanna,
They're buying bonds for
if they buy a
investment.
bond, they wanna make sure they have it for
Right.
at least an X number of years. Actually, in fact, some of the bonds that the city owns that we invest in have gotten called, and so that they pay us off early.
Yeah.
So, but we do, there are call provisions put in there, and that's something I can discuss with Phil Cost and Phil
Yep.
Ellers to kind of look at.
Yeah.
How that might be structured, that if we do get in additional donations, where those call provisions might be, but, it's all about the marketability. So you want to add those call provisions that make the bonds attractive to investors and thus a better interest rate.
Right.
If the call provisions aren't like too early, then they might want a higher interest rate on those, so it's kind of
a game.
so I'll leave that to the experts at Ellers to kind of recommend.
It's good to know about the call provisions though, because especially not only donors, but if other these municipalities hop on, we
Right.
saw how much potentially
Right.
it would
Yeah.
cost, the example in that Joe's document of what we would be getting. So, yeah, no, that's good to know.
All right, item number 16 is an audit of the bills. Those were emailed to us.
Did we make a motion to approve?
Oh, do we need a motion? I didn't think.
It just says review.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll basically say we discuss it, and then I'll attach it as an attachment so in the minutes, so that everyone's.
Sounds good, thank you.
Those, the bills were emailed to us.
Yep.
Looked over those. I will make a motion to approve check number 1500 to 1907 as presented.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, committee will vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Ayes have it. Item number 17 is to set our next meeting date.
I think it'd be January 7th would be the first Tuesday in the new year,
Yes, sir.
which works well because it's not near New Year's, so kind of luck out with the timing of the Tuesday.
And I do need to meet, I'm not sure if you guys schedule, but I would need to meet that first week in January.
You would need the first week.
Or technically the second week, but the first full week. So the 7th would work for me, and then I'll be traveling for work in the middle of the month, so.
Shane?
Yeah, that works for me.
Perfect.
All right, so January 7th at 4:45 PM, does that still work for you, just so we get that 15 minutes in, so we can kind of
That's perfect, yeah.
help out Public Works there, so they're not here till too late? All right, so our next meeting will be January 7th at 4:45 PM. Our next item is adjournment. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Motion and second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, committee will vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Ayes have it, and we stand adjourned at 6:35.
Excellent.